Off the coast of Sri Lanka, in the middle of the open ocean, something enormous was fighting to stay alive. A Sri Lankan Navy patrol boat was cutting through the waves on a routine return to shore. The officers were tired. The day had been long. The sea stretched endlessly in every direction. Quiet, indifferent, just water and sky. Then, one man stopped. He squinted toward a large gray shape in the distance. At first, it looked like a rock. A reef, maybe. But rocks don't move. And this thing was moving, heaving, thrashing, struggling against the current with a desperation that even from a distance was impossible to ignore. He grabbed his binoculars. What he saw through those lenses froze him where he stood. A young elephant alone, miles from any shore, was barely keeping his head above water. His massive legs were churning beneath the surface. His trunk was raised high, gasping for air. His eyes, even from that distance, told a story of pure terror. The officer lowered the binoculars. He turned to his crew. Nobody said a word. Nobody needed to. They turned the boat around. None of these men had ever rescued an elephant before. None of them had ever even thought about it. They were trained for maritime operations patrol, surveillance, defense. There was no manual for this, no protocol, no equipment designed for pulling a several-ton animal out of the open sea. But there was also no version of this moment where they turned away and went home. As the boat drew closer, the full weight of the situation crashed over them. The elephant was enormous, even half submerged. His size was staggering. His legs pumped furiously, but he was losing the battle. The current was pulling him. Exhaustion was swallowing him. Every minute that passed was a minute closer to the end. The officers huddled. How do you even begin to save something this big? They couldn't lift him. The boat would capsize under his weight. They couldn't simply lure him to shore. The shore was miles away, and this animal had nothing left. They looked around at what they had: ropes, diving gear, their own hands, and the kind of stubborn human refusal to accept the unacceptable. It would have to be enough. Several officers climbed into a smaller vessel and moved carefully toward the elephant, keeping a respectful distance. They had to be smart. A panicked animal of this size could overturn their boat in a single desperate thrash. They couldn't afford to frighten him further. One officer extended his arm toward the exhausted creature. A slow, open gesture. A wordless message. We are not a threat. We are here to help. The elephant, later nicknamed Jumbo by the crew, turned his weary eyes toward the men. He was too tired to fight, too tired to run. He simply looked at them as if, somehow, he understood that these strange creatures in the water were his only chance. The divers slipped into the ocean. They moved slowly, deliberately, every motion calculated to project calm. Their hearts were hammering. Their training had never covered anything close to this. One diver carefully climbed onto the great animal's back, an almost surreal moment. A man balanced on a swimming elephant miles from land and began working a rope around Jumbo's head. His hands moved with precision. The knot had to hold. It had to be firm enough to guide, but loose enough not to harm. One mistake, and Jumbo could panic, go under, and take the diver with him. The rope was secured. The men throttled the boat engines gently and began to pull. And then Jumbo screamed. It was not the sound of an animal startled or confused. It was the sound of agony, raw, deafening, and heartbreaking. It echoed across the open water. The officers looked at each other, horrified. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. They slowed the engines, and that's when they saw it. A spreading pink stain in the water around Jumbo's body, dark at the center. Unmistakable. Blood. The men went cold. Blood in open water meant one thing, and every sailor knew it. Every second they stayed in that spot, the risk climbed. The ocean has its own predators, and they are not known for mercy or hesitation. But they looked at Jumbo, this exhausted, terrified, bleeding creature who had been fighting alone in the middle of the ocean, and not one of them moved toward the boat ladder to climb out of the water. Instead, the divers went deeper. They submerged and moved carefully alongside the animal's legs, searching for the source of the bleeding. And what they found made their stomachs drop. A large sea creature, later identified as a type of parasitic marine animal, had latched onto Jumbo's leg. Its spines were buried deep into the elephant's flesh. Every movement Jumbo made, every desperate kick of his legs as he fought to stay afloat, had driven those spines deeper. He hadn't just fallen into the ocean. He had been suffering the entire time. The divers exchanged a look beneath the surface. There was no discussion. No vote. They got to work. And here is the part that will stay with you. As the divers carefully, painstakingly began removing each spine from Jumbo's leg, a process that must have been excruciating, the elephant went still. This massive animal, powerful enough to overturn their boat without trying, held himself steady in the water. He seemed to understand that the pain now was the price of the pain stopping later. He trusted these strangers with his life. One by one, the spines came free. The divers worked until the last one was gone. With the source of his suffering finally removed, Jumbo's screaming stopped. The ocean went quiet, except for the sound of engines and the steady rhythm of his breathing. And now, the men understood everything. How Jumbo had ended up here, miles from shore, alone and desperate in the open sea. He hadn't wandered. He hadn't gotten lost out of carelessness. He had been driven out. The herd moves through the Kokolai Lagoon, a body of water connecting the jungle to the coast. During the crossing, something had gone wrong. Perhaps the current had taken him. Perhaps the pain from his wound had disoriented him. Perhaps he had panicked and swum the wrong direction in the dark. Whatever the sequence of events, Jumbo had crossed from the lagoon into open ocean without realizing it. And by the time he knew he was in trouble, there was no shore in sight. He had been out there, alone, for hours, fighting the current, fighting the pain, fighting the sea, and he had almost lost. The crew pulled Jumbo slowly, gently, through the water toward the coast. Every meter was a negotiation between his exhaustion and their determination. He faded in and out of strength. There were moments when the men held their breath, watching him, willing him to keep going. Just a little further, just keep going. When the shore finally appeared, no one celebrated. They were too focused, too afraid to assume anything until it was done. And then, sand. Jumbo's feet found the ground beneath him. He staggered. He swayed. He stood on the beach on trembling legs, water streaming from his body, and looked out at the men who had followed him all the way to shore. Then he collapsed. The veterinarians came quickly. They took one look at the enormous animal lying on the sand and warned the officers to prepare for the worst. His condition was critical. His wounds were deep. His body had been pushed far past its limits. But they worked through the night anyway. Medicines, treatments, careful hands, cleaning wounds and wrapping injuries. Day by day, Jumbo came back. His eyes grew brighter. His breathing steadied. He began to eat. He began to stand. The trembling in his legs faded, replaced by something that looked more and more like the strength that had kept him alive in the ocean. While he recovered, the naval officers never stopped. They searched the coastline and the lagoon system until they found what they were looking for: Jumbo's herd, moving through the waters of the Kokolai Lagoon, exactly where elephants in this region were known to travel. When the day came, the men guided Jumbo toward the lagoon, not to the deep crossing to a gentler stretch where the water was manageable. They stayed with him, their small boat moving alongside his great gray body until the bottom was shallow enough that he could find his own way, and then they let him go. Jumbo waded forward. He moved into the shallows on his own, slowly, deliberately, his healed leg carrying him with a sureness that would have seemed impossible just days before. Then he stopped. He turned around, and he raised his trunk and trumpeted a long, resonant sound that rolled across the water and into the trees beyond the shore. Every man on that boat felt it in his chest. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't random. Every one of them knew, without needing to say it, that Jumbo was saying goodbye. Then, from the tree line, the answer came. One trumpet, then another, then a chorus. The herd emerging from the jungle at the sound of a voice they recognized. They moved toward the water's edge and greeted Jumbo with a joy that needed no translation. Trunks touched trunks, bodies pressed together. The sounds they made were low and warm and ancient. The naval officers on that boat trained men, tough men. Men who spent their lives on rough seas could not hold back their tears. They had gone out that morning on a routine patrol. They came home having pulled a life back from the edge of the ocean, handed it back to the wild, and witnessed something the ocean rarely allows: a happy ending. And somewhere in the waters off Sri Lanka, an elephant lives who once looked into the eyes of strangers and decided to trust them. He was right.